Welcome to another hardware bench video. Today I'm going to show you how to lap a CPU. This particular one is the Ryzen 3700X. Got some different sandpaper here. You're going to see that it's pretty painless, doesn't take much time, doesn't cost much. I've literally got less than half a dozen sheets of sandpaper. You just need a smooth surface like we've got here and a bit of sandpaper and a bit of elbow grease. That is pretty much it. Right, so we're back. I don't know if the camera's picking up. Anyway, that's the 3700X. Paper wise, we've got some 2000 grit there. Is that showing it? I don't bother using that anymore. That's only for if you want to mess around getting mirror finishes, which is about as useful as rubbing it with your cock, so I wouldn't bother doing that. Got 1200 grit there that we'll finish with after the 800 grit, after the 400 grit, and we'll start off with 320 because that's the most abrasive I've got, apart from some 60, because I've ended up losing the 200 odd. So we'll start off pretty simple. One thing I will do, so we'll take it out of the clamshell. Obviously don't bend the pins, that would be pretty stupid. You got your flat surface. Right, pretty easy. Push down. For a while, turn it again. Right, so you can probably see there that actually that's a pretty flat CPU. It's sort of sticking up a little bit around this ridge here, but other than that, that is fairly flat. But anyway, we'll carry on. Now I'm not looking to get it all the way down to the copper on the whole thing, partly because I do tend to operate in damp conditions, and if you have copper on copper, there's always a chance that it could flip and bond itself, although the thermal paste should stop that. And you can see there, it's starting to get... Obviously I'm going to go down to the copper on the most raised parts. And you see it start to go brown a bit, you know you're getting there. Right, so you can see, you might just be able to see there around the very edges where it's starting to get all the nickel off now. So we're getting down to the copper, so it's obviously slightly raised on them edges. So straight away, you're going to get a better contact with your cooler, assuming that you've lapped your cooler as well, which I always do. I've got to admit, I've not had one like this before. It is just generally round that outside edge. So this probably, I'm going to maintain most of the nickel in the middle. Just because, like I say, the nickel's on there for a reason. And the reason it is on there is if you happen to operate your CPU in damp conditions and you're using a copper cooler, the two could end up, I've never heard of it happening, but in theory the two could end up flipping bonding themselves together. Right, well all the Ryzen writing is off there. And in all honesty, that's probably even good enough. You could use it now if you really wanted, but you don't really want any deep scratches in there. So I'll move on to the 400. Hang on. Wipe some of the dust off. You can see there's a load on there, so it's better to do that rather than getting it all on your wet and dry, which I never bother to wet. But yeah, you don't have to make a big fuss about it. In terms of what you're going to gain, if you're on a typical air or water cooled system or all in one, that's a little bit better, you're going to end up with about 2 degrees. But this particular CPU, benching it on air, the maximum turbo clock on these is 4.4 gigahertz. This one would only pull 4.3, so I had no overclocking headroom at all. Admittedly, it was summertime, so that didn't help. Anyway, I undervolted it slightly, and that did make it so I could benchmark at between 4.33 and 4.36. So in theory, doing this, if I was under exactly the same conditions again, that would most likely get me the max turbo clock. That's what I would anticipate. I'd probably have to put the voltage back up to where it's supposed to be to get that. There you are. So that's where we are after 800 grit. Quick run over with 1200. I say, yeah, you can go for mirror finishes, you can go for a load of bullshit. I've seen videos where people have gone to an engineer that they've got to go and put it down to the copper. You probably would get a little bit better heat transfer if you went copper all the way, but all you've got to do is literally sand it for longer. I just don't think you're going to gain that much. It's the flat surface is what counts. Right, I don't know if you can see that on the camera, and I'll try and zoom it in a bit if I can. I just don't think you can when you... Right, so that has got a few scratches on there, which in theory, particularly if you was ever benching on liquid nitrogen or something, you actually want, because that will actually help the thermal paste grip it, and then you're less likely to crack or anything. You can see I ain't damaged any pins. As long as you hold it around the edge firmly, you're not going to have any problems there. So that is basically a lapped CPU. I'll stick it back in the clamshell for now. Right, so there you have it. A nicely lapped CPU. Took pretty much zero effort, zero amount of time, and it's good to go. And I could near enough guarantee that on the vast majority of systems, provided you've done the cooler as well, so either your cold block or your bottom of your air cooler, you're going to get at least 2 or 3 degrees lower temperatures, which, like I say, in real performance terms, I would estimate on that is probably going to give me my full boost clock, which will be like another 0.05 gigahertz, which don't sound a lot, but if it stops it throttling and it does just give you them few more megahertz, you know, it's free performance, isn't it? I've pretty much had to do nothing for it, and it's cost nothing. So there you go, that's my take on it. Obviously the real reason lapping became a thing, well, it's not obvious if you don't know, is because in a lot of the Intel CPUs especially are concave. I can't remember what the flipping reason for that is, but they're concave, and a lot of the CPU coolers you buy now will have a bit that sticks out to go in that concave part, which is why you need to lap both. But when you're benching on liquid nitrogen, what will end up happening is that gap between the IHS and the pot, the concave bit, you can end up where the paste will start to crack and break down if it's too thick. So obviously if you can lessen the amount of paste you need in there, the more stable it's going to be under liquid nitrogen or liquid helium. So that's how it all originally came about. But I've done it to quite a few CPUs that I've dailied, and there's no disadvantage to it. There can't be any disadvantage to getting cooler temperatures and potentially a little bit more performance, whether you overclock or whether it just allows you to hit the max boost clocks. So I'm not saying anyone should do it. I would actually say that if your CPU's under warranty, then don't do it, because if anything goes wrong, obviously you're not going to be able to send it back. But if you're running an older CPU like the 3700X and you're not quite ready to spend a load of money upgrading, it's perhaps just another way of getting just that little bit much more performance out of your system to keep it going a bit longer. And you know, if you get into overclocking and optimising all your other settings, that little bit of extra performance there along with another load of bits could probably give you, what, 10% maybe overall. That could be enough to keep you going for another year. So that's what it's all about. Hope you've enjoyed the video, hope you got something useful out of it, and I'll see you on the next one.